Hi everyone, I'm John Orvea, part of the mitigation team of UN Environmental Program. I'm part of the MOVE team. I'm very glad to be here today with you to talk about electric mobility in Antigua and Barbuda. Today's session will be focused on how a country such as Antigua and Barbuda, with its particularities, have been involved and have been advancing on electric mobility. And to know more about that, we have with us Melissa LeBlanc Bekashkan from the Ministry of Environment, who have been in charge of different projects and implementation on electric mobility in the country. So welcome very much to Vikas and Melissa to today's session on MOVE. They will be talking to us about, as I said, on various advances on electric mobility in Antigua and Barbuda. So welcome to this session, MOVE. Thank you so much for being here. And the floor is yours. I will just start presenting the screen.
Thanks so much for that. Good morning, good day, everybody. My name is Melissa LeBlanc, as Joni would have said. I am the SLIM project coordinator. I'll elaborate on what that is in a bit. And I am also a technical officer at the Department of Environment in Antigua and Barbuda. I am joined by Vikash Khan, who is a technical officer also at the Department of Environment. We both work on several projects in renewable energy, focused on electric vehicles to support the transition of Antigua and Barbuda. So with that, I will begin. So we're starting here, Antigua and Barbuda, barriers and advances in electric mobility. So Joni, if you could, the first slide, please. So setting the stage, Antigua and Barbuda is a small island developing state. I have the size written down there for you all. So it's approximately 281 square kilometers. And in this 281 square kilometers, we have approximately 50,000 vehicles. Now, as in other small island developing states, the majority of the vehicles that are imported into Antigua, because everything has to be imported, we don't have any vehicle manufacturers in the country. The majority is secondhand used vehicles from different countries, be it Japan or the United States. And it's not, honestly, it doesn't even come close. So according to the numbers that we would have gotten from the customs department, we have a 3-year average of about 10% of the vehicles imported are new and 90% are used vehicles. And of these vehicles, I've said a few numbers, we have approximately 50 electric vehicles in country. Now, this is all relevant for a variety of reasons. So we're getting these used older vehicles that do not have any GHG limiting or any standards. If they do, it's very old and outdated, which can result, of course, in the vehicles that we drive having higher GHG emissions than newer internal combustion engine vehicles, just for reference. In this, there's also the issue of becoming somewhat of a dumping ground for older vehicles. So in more developed countries, after about 5 years, I think folks typically change their cars once they can, which is not the case here in Antigua. So the used vehicles can be anywhere from more than 10 years old, and then we drive them here on the roads until they stop working. And when they stop working, generally people just park them in their yards and there's no real disposal process. So as is moving forward worldwide to vehicles, we are at risk of becoming a dumping ground for internal combustion engine vehicles that they no longer want in more developed countries. So the photo that I have here is just to give you a bit of an image of what our roads look like. This is one of the most popular roads in Antigua, one of the nicest roads in Antigua. And as you can see, there is quite a bit of cars coming down the road. So we do already have some issues with traffic congestion. Now, it's not as bad as other countries, for example, Trinidad or Jamaica, but we have noticed a traffic congestion issue that is, I don't want to say in the beginnings because it's very much established, and I see as it is right now, it could only get worse. So we have to keep this in mind as we are committing to transition away from internal combustion engine vehicles in our NDC. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, in our nationally determined contributions, we would have revised and submitted them in 2021, along with, of course, several other countries. And I've not highlighted all of the NDCs here, but these are the ones that I thought most relevant to the presentation and conversation today. So we've committed to 86% renewable energy in the electricity sector. So that's a mistake of mine. It should have been 2030, so my apologies. A ban on the importation of new internal combustion engine vehicles by 2030 with an indicative start date of 2025. And then finally here, 100% of government vehicles will be electric vehicles by 2035. Now, as you may notice, I have listed that all these targets are conditional. It's conditional based on access to finance. As a result, our NDC implementation and EV renewable energy transition is largely being pushed forward by projects, so on a project basis. Yes, next slide, please. So our first project that I'm going to highlight is our electric school bus project. The project was facilitated by a bilateral agreement between the Department of Environment within the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Environment and the government of Italy. The electric buses were handed over to the Antigua and Barbuda Transport Board in August of 2020. The Transport Board operates the school bus fleet. So there is a school bus fleet that arranges for children to go to school. And the vehicles have been in service in the school bus fleet since September 2020 to the present day. Now, I have photos here of the buses as well as one of the bus drivers plugging in the bus. And I think finally I have a photo of our Minister Sir Marlwin Joseph handing over the keys to the bus to the Transport Board. Now, in terms of challenges, procurement of electric buses in Antigua and Barbuda, and I imagine in other small island developing states, has been difficult because we do not have a market of scale. So, for example, any type of discount or anything that you might get from ordering 50 to 100 buses or something in a mass transit system, that does not come to us. We also have the issue of even attracting bidders because, again, if you can supply 50 to 100 buses, why would you necessarily be interested in bidding on just 2 buses? Which results in very high costs for these vehicles. I believe these buses cost approximately $525,000 US, which actually was more than I think was budgeted for them at the time. So within the project, arrangements had to be made so that the buses can be paid for, because the point of the project was to integrate and implement these buses into the school bus fleet. Further from that, we've had a few challenges as it relates to data monitoring. The buses should have been outfitted with telematics systems whereby we could get the data automatically already digital, but that did not quite work out. I will let Vikash give you a bit of that in a second. So I'll pause on that. And we've also had challenges as it relates to the time to ship replacement parts. So something as simple as a door sensor. So, with smarter vehicles, they have a lot of safety protection mechanisms within them. And when your door sensor is not working, your bus is not going to drive. So then the bus has to be parked up and wait until that sensor comes in. Now, again, in a small island developing state, we have to import most things. So the parts have to be ordered and then shipped to Antigua, which can take quite some time. And, we want the buses operational as much as possible. Lastly, what I'll mention is the bus drivers have complained a little bit about these buses being able to go uphill. They've said something to the effect where they've had to maybe roll down to the bottom of the hill to be able to get up the entire hill. So that in itself has also been a challenge. But right now, I'll pause and let Vikash give you a bit of insight on the data monitoring.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. So thanks for that, Mel. So in terms of the buses, since we were not able to procure or include the telematics system in the bus due to price constraints, what we did is we actually collected manual data, and we asked the bus drivers themselves to just do up an Excel file pertaining to some data in terms of their routes, in terms of their charging time, in terms of at what percentage they charged at, what mileage they started to charge at, and then what mileage that they charge, what percentage they charged at. So this manual data was not how we would like to, but it did provide us with some information and valuable information pertaining to the bus as well. Um, the other thing, as Mel mentioned, there were some issues with the technology itself. We did have some issues in terms of the specifications and stuff like that, which actually led into some great lessons learned that Mel will mention later in terms of procurement for buses for the SLIM project. Um, but in terms of general technology, in terms of the um, uptake of the technology. The bus drivers, they liked the technology. They had very good reviews pertaining to the bus, in terms of the students taking to the buses, liking the buses. Some of them would say that the students would prefer to go on the electric bus. So even though we had some hiccups in terms of procurement and stuff like that, we could say that the public generally has a liking towards the technology. So Mel, if it's okay, I'll pass it back to you now.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this here is another electric vehicle project that we actually have. I think it's just about closed. It was a bit smaller, but also falls into the portfolio of projects to support electric vehicle uptake in the country. So this project is the EDF, which is Environmental Defense Fund Bidirectional Charger Demonstration Project. So the aim of the project is to demonstrate vehicle-to-building capabilities of electric vehicles using the Nissan Leaf. The hope at the time when we signed on to this project is that we would have been able to use the electric buses that we would have just shown. However, the buses, which are BYD, at least the version that we got, were not bidirectional. They were not capable of being bidirectional. So thankfully for us, we had a Nissan Leaf within the government fleet that we can use to still implement the project. The bidirectional charger was installed last year, March 2022, at the Victory Center, which is a special needs school, and it is operational. So as it is right now, the Nissan Leaf, in the event of anything, can supply electricity to the school for several days. I'll stop here again and allow for Vikash to jump in and give you a bit of information about, how many days, what the testing was like, and what the experience was like.
Thanks again. So just to give some context, this is a project that we in Antigua and Barbuda are actually very proud of, given the fact that this is the first bidirectional charger to be installed in the Caribbean. So it's something that we're looking at scaling up in Antigua and Barbuda. We started with the school, but we're hoping to scale up in terms of clinics and also other first responders and emergency sectors as redundancy for backup power generation. As of right now, in our clinics, etc., we're installing grid interactive renewable energy system, which we expect, if there should be a grid outage, would obviously provide power. But we're also hoping to scale up in terms of bidirectional chargers and also procure more bidirectional capable vehicles, in which, if should the outage go for a prolonged time in terms of the batteries can't produce enough power, then we'll be able to produce these facilities with power as well. Just to give some context in terms of this, the type of charger that was installed was a wall-box KSAR unit. So the wall-box KSAR unit is actually capable of pushing 7 kilowatts, and the Nissan Leaf is also capable of pushing between 7 to 10 kilowatts bidirectionally as well. We were very lucky that the load of the building itself was very small. So the Victory Center load is roughly around 3 kilowatts peak. So in terms of that, given the fact too as well that the Nissan Leaf has about a 40 kilowatt hour battery, we're expecting that if in the case of an outage, the Nissan Leaf should be able to at least power the Victory Center for probably between 12 to 20 hours. The other aspect of it is, as I mentioned, the 3 kilowatts is not really in energy efficiency mode. That is with air conditions, etc. So even if we go into energy efficiency mode, should there be any kind of prolonged outage, then we expect for even longer. So as I mentioned, this charging port as well was a CHAdeMO charging port. And we have received information as well that Wallbox is upgrading from CHAdeMO to CCS2, which means that they have produced new models of the KSAR unit, etc., for bidirectional units. Mel, pass over to you.
Sure thing. Thanks, Vikash. And as you can see here, the kids were really happy to be involved in the project. So just highlighting that last photo at the bottom there. Next slide, please. So this is the Antigua and Barbuda Sustainable Low Emission Island Mobility Project, the SLIM project that I mentioned earlier that I am presently coordinating, is our biggest electric vehicle project to date. The project is funded by the Global Environment Facility. We're part of the GEF7 round of projects. And also, of course, it's being implemented by UNEP, executed by the Department of Environment. So the project officially started in April 2021. It has a blended budget, so it's getting 3.245 million US dollars from the GEF, and then it has 9.7 million US dollars in co-financing from the government of Antigua and Barbuda. The project is a 4-year project, and it's scheduled to be completed in March 2025. The aim of the project is to promote low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient public and private transportation. So I am going to take a bit of time on this project specifically because it is a much larger project than the ones that I would have mentioned before. So the first component, because it's a 4-component project. The first component, as you see on the screen, is the institutionalization of low carbon and climate resilient electric mobility. Now, that's pretty much project language to say that this is where we are going to put all the needed steps in place to facilitate the EV transition. This includes stakeholder engagement, the preparation of needed technical studies, and communication strategy. Thus far, we've been able to do a fair bit in terms of engaging stakeholders. We've engaged hundreds of men and women to tell them about, of course, the project, the electric vehicle transition. And we're doing all of this, and the reason that we're doing all of this communication and engagement because it's really important to get the buy-in of our stakeholders, get the buy-in of the people in Antigua and Barbuda, because they, we can't blame them. Obviously, it's all about cost, and an electric vehicle is significantly more expensive than a standard internal combustion engine used vehicle. So apart from the cost, there of course there's still what we encountered initially were quite a few misconceptions about electric vehicles, a lot of concerns. Is the battery gonna run out on me on the road? Now remember what I said about how small Antigua is. So it's very, very much unlikely that your battery will be running out on you on the road. And they were, concerned about things like, do EVs just spontaneously catch on fire, various things. So that was really important. We've also been able to get support from various international bodies, such as the International Renewable Energy Agency and the National Renewable Energy Lab, who are both helping us with some of the technical studies required. So Irina would have completed our first fleet electrification feasibility analysis, which looked at the overall fleet of Antigua and Barbuda and how much renewable energy would be needed to support the EV transition, because I'm sure this platform is very familiar, but of course we don't want all these EVs charging from heavy fuel oil, because we want to reduce emissions as much as possible. While small island developing states, of course, contribute the least to climate change, we do still want to have that in the back of our minds and operate as sustainably as possible. So moving on to the second component, which is short-term barrier removal through low-carbon electric mobility and climate-resilient renewable energy demonstrations. So this is the big ticket item of the project. This is where we are procuring and implementing two electric taxis, 2 electric buses, and a solar carport. So as it is right now, we've completed the procurement for the electric taxis and associated charging stations. We are having a bit of a challenge with the procurement for the electric buses, like I would have mentioned before, because it's difficult to get. Well, first, electric buses are very expensive. And we have to look at how this project can be replicated. The electric buses from this project, the intent is that the buses will be integrated into the bus fleet, the public bus fleet. However, as it is right now, many bus drivers purchase their own bus. Antigua and Barbuda does not have a national public transit system. So each bus driver operates very much as their own business. Of course, there are instances where one person may own more than one bus, but that I don't believe that is the majority. So, if you are using the BYD buses at a price of, for 2 buses, $525,000 the average bus driver cannot purchase their own bus at 230 $230,000. Anyway, way too much money for them to be expected to purchase, despite of course, the obvious savings that we're familiar with. Gas versus electricity, more efficient, and different things like that. So we are having a challenge moving forward on that item because of the cost of electric buses. Further from that, of course, I mentioned we're also looking at installing a solar carport. We are really excited to be getting support from the National Renewable Energy Lab. They're helping us to develop our specifications, and we hope to be advertising to supply starting our procurement with an advertisement before the end of this year. So moving on to our third component, preparing for scale-up and replication of low-carbon electric mobility and climate-resilient renewable energy. This is where we're, of course, looking at scale-up, to put it simply. Again, project language. We're really looking at how we're going to expand and have this rollout in Antigua and Barbuda. So what we've decided to focus on is actually an issue that has been raised by our stakeholders on several different occasions, which is, where am I going to charge my car? Yes, of course, Antigua is small, but not everyone feels comfortable charging at their home, or not everybody may be able to charge at their home. The cost of electricity many times is a concern of the general public as one of, I think, their highest bills. So, as much as we try to present it to them, well, how much do you spend on gas? So, it really is a 1-for-1, and how much you'll be spending on electricity will be lower. They do still have that reservation about adding a large electricity load to their homes. So that's why we decided to look at charging stations across the country. So of course, at your local convenience store, at the supermarket, at different locations where people spend a lot of time. And we're also looking at putting it in government buildings. So as I did mention it before, the government has committed to transition their fleet to electric by 2035. So this project is a way of beginning that. So you'd be able to charge your vehicle at work, which creates kind of an interesting space, because there is a fuel allowance for many government workers in the government of Antigua and Barbuda. So there's an option to look at switching out this quote-unquote fuel allowance for free charging, or charging at a really nominal fee at your office, at your government building. Finally, which is our fourth component, we're looking at the long-term environmental sustainability of low-carbon electric mobility. Now, I have mentioned earlier that Antiguans hold on to their vehicles. That said, there's a derelict vehicle problem in Antigua and Barbuda. Internal combustion engine, we haven't had electric vehicles long enough for that to be an electric vehicle problem. But we have this issue right now where, sometimes vehicles are abandoned at the side of the road, or folks just keep these derelict vehicles, and they can become an issue for a variety of reasons. They're a health hazard, they're a location for vector-borne diseases, etc. So we have been, the National Solid Waste, we've reached out to them, and we've been working with them. In 2020, they implemented a derelict vehicle project where they were collecting derelict vehicles from the side of the road and storing them. They're working alongside a local scrap metal company to strip the vehicle and sell off the various parts. So we're working to support that, in that the project has a training component where it's looking at how to essentially dispose of these vehicles sustainably. What are the best practices? What is the safest and best way to implement it? Luckily for us, I've recently discovered there's another project that's looking at the disposal of derelict vehicles within the Caribbean. It's a Jeff Islands project. So our plan is to work alongside them and see how we can really support this section, because it's a major issue, and I think we need to have as much support as possible in rolling out how we address it. And this is before I've even mentioned the next bit, which is the electric vehicle component, where we're looking at, of course, the reuse, recycling, and safe disposal of the electric batteries. But the allocation in this project really, in my opinion, just gets us on the starting ground. It just kicks it off. There's a lot more work to be done for the environmental sustainability of vehicles in general. So next slide, please. So thus far, we've had several advances that we can, of course, be happy and proud of. I mentioned quite a few of them already. So we have our slim and electric vehicle communication campaign. I think the general perception of electric vehicles has very much changed in the last few years since when we started the project. Right now, instead of us reaching out to local car dealerships, sometimes they're reaching out to us. I think the general public is very much more comfortable and they know that there are electric vehicles in Antigua. So I think we've been really successful at that. We've had robust stakeholder consultation with the taxi company as well as the bus association and other key stakeholders in the industry. We've had so many consultations with them, and we make sure that they review our documents, or we ask them very nicely to review our documents, because of course everybody's perspective is really important as we're looking at this transition. We have completed our first fleet electrification feasibility analysis. We have another one that will come soon, that will focus on feasibility analysis for government vehicles. So we have a consultant working on that aspect. So right now we have been trying for quite some time to collect all the needed data. Data can always be a bit of a challenge in developing countries. So gathering the data to have that study done as well as possible has taken us some time. We've completed the procurement of 2 electric vehicle taxis as well as the associated charging stations. We have completed reports on best practices regarding end-of-life vehicle disposal, the installation of public and private charging stations, as well as best practices to regulate fuel imports. This next point was it was quite a big deal in terms of stakeholder consultation and moving forward. The Department of Environment has a partnership with the West Indies Oil Company to implement EV charging stations, as well as supporting the just transition for the RE and EV energy transition as a whole. So the West Indies Oil Company bunkers oil and gas, well, I think just oil. And they also provide gas to all the gas stations in Antigua and Barbuda. So we thought, what better partner to reach out to start to work with them, keeping the just transition in mind, as well as their current presence in the country, to work with us on implementing charging stations. You're already fueling cars, why not support, fueling electric vehicles? So finally here, we recently completed the procurement for our legal advisor. Now, a lot of what we see challenges with is our regulations. So we do have a few, cabinet level decisions stating that there's certain waivers on electric vehicles, for example, duty and the environmental levy are waived. And recently the government committed to transition of their own vehicular fleet. But what we need is to strengthen our existing regulations as it relates to that, because right now the documents are more internal and we need to update our laws. So thankfully we've brought on somebody very recently, so he'll be able to start working on that quite soon. Next slide, please. So these here are just some photos from all the things I would have mentioned before. So the top left is a photo from our consultation with the waste disposal and scrap metal companies. The bottom left is from an EV demonstration we had at the West Indies Oil Company. So we really aren't just talking to the senior level folks within these companies and agencies. So it was more of an open day. So all the staff at the company were invited to hear us speak about electric vehicles, opportunities, charging stations, take a look inside of the car, and really and truly just get the word out as much as possible. To the top right is a photo from an EV demonstration at Abbas, which is a technical school here in Antigua and Barbuda, which I'll let Vikash talk about in a second, or maybe at the end. But I'll bring in Vikash to give you a bit more information on our partnerships with schools. And the bottom right is a photo from a stakeholder consultation with the Taxi Association, where they're posing with one of the government's electric vehicles. So I think in the photo there's UNEP, the Taxi Association, as well as the Department of Environment. Next slide, please. So challenges to our EV transition. Most vehicles imported to Antigua and Barbuda are used low-cost internal combustion engine vehicles. Now, when I say low-cost, it's the price difference is huge. For example, I can get a used Toyota Vitz for about 10,000 Eastern Caribbean dollars, whereas a new electric MG can cost me $100,000. So it's a huge price gap. If we were comparing new vehicle to new vehicle, the price difference isn't major. It could be maybe about $20,000 to $30,000, but certainly not, that huge. And that kind of takes me into the next point, which is the cost of electric vehicles. The thing is, the vehicles aren't being brought into the country on a major basis. We have one electric vehicle supplier, and he's, of course, bringing in as needed, right? I don't think I know he's not bringing in 10 and 20 vehicles at a time. It's maybe, 2 or 3. So that in itself doesn't allow for that supplier to provide lower cost options. That actually takes me into one of the other points I mentioned. We only have one electric vehicle supplier in country. Now, we've done a lot of good work, in my opinion, with car dealerships and trying to bring them on board, but they have what they flagged as the demand issue for electric vehicles, which of course ties back into the cost of electric vehicles. So they are hesitant to start supplying these vehicles, and then people don't want them. They've also flagged that due to the demand in the country, the manufacturers may not be considering Antigua and Barbuda as a market for electric vehicles as yet. So I'll jump into the next one, which is back to the electric buses. So we have issues with the cost. So it's the cost of the buses, the cost of insurance for the buses, and the maintenance of the buses, and the supply of the spare parts for the buses. Now, the cost of insurance is very high. Now, thankfully, with any project, which is a pilot, we can facilitate those costs. However, outside of that, it comes back to the point of what is the scalability? How can this project be replicated? How can bus drivers replicate this investment if the costs are so high? Another challenge is the buy-in of some of our key stakeholders. Now, whilst we have engaged with folks and they're like, yeah, this is a good idea, in terms of the actual applicability, how they're going to apply it to the work that they're doing, many times we haven't seen that happen. So they're still, kind of slow to the uptake of it. Moving on to the next thing, there are limitations of DC charging in popular areas. So popular area one being the city of St. John's, which is our one major city or town, if you have me. The grid right now is so congested. When we reached out to the utility company and we, asked them about the possibility of installing the DC charging stations, they said, no, there's no space for that in the city of St. John's, which is, of course, a problem because that's a heavily populated area that would be the best suited to these charging stations. However, our grid would require upgrades that the project is unlikely to be able to facilitate to get those DC charging stations in St. John's. So we've had to look outside of the city. Lastly, the readiness of local stakeholders to support the EV transition. It's very similar to, I think, the buy-in. I think right now everybody is very happy to have the conversation and kind of eye it and see how things go. But in terms of actually being the one to invest, it has been fairly limited in the space of the general public. Next slide, please. I'm not seeing it. If it's up, I'm not seeing. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. So this slide, I think may be my my final slide in this presentation. So at the top, we have the donation of electric vehicle chargers at Antigua State College, which is another school within Antigua that has opportunities for technical training. Below that, and I'll have Vikash explain all of this to you in 2 minutes. Below that, another training session with teachers at Abyss on the EV charging stations. To the top right, another training that we would have done with emergency responders on EV safety and accident response and intervention, which was a really, really well attended, very good workshop. I'm really proud of the results of that, and we expect to have another workshop within the next 6 months to expand on what we would have done at that session. And finally, the bottom right, these are our Slim Project electric taxis in Antigua, ready to drive. So also very proud of getting those on the ground in country. And I think so. What I'll again stop right now and have Vikash talk a little bit about the partnership we have with a couple of the vocational institutions and how we're working with them.
Hi, Mel. Thanks again. So, given the fact that we're moving towards this transition in renewable energy electric vehicles, it's obvious one of the important parts of it is capacity building, not just through the just transition process, but also through all of our projects that we're doing. So, as Mel mentioned, the Antigua and Barbuda Institute of Continued Education, which is ABIS for short, is the only vocational school in Antigua and Barbuda. So the Department of Environment, we actually signed a memorandum of agreement with them to partner with them to help develop their curriculums, to also include in their curriculum the installation of solar systems, wind turbine, energy efficiency, green construction, electric vehicle maintenance, charging stations, etc. So these pictures would have just been some of the initial collaborations with them. The Department of Environment would have already started the process of donating technologies to ABIS. We have already donated technologies such as an electric vehicle. We donated some charging stations. We've donated a 2 kilowatt wind turbine. We have donated a solar air condition. And we have also donated an atmospheric generator. All of these technologies we hope to incorporate into their curriculum. As Mel mentioned too, we are working with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, with some technical assistance in the SLIM project, but they are also working with us for that curriculum development. Their work has been vital to us. Their experience and understanding of the technologies and the curriculum development has been vital to us. So we haven't started as yet in terms of the actual curriculum development, but we're hoping by the ending of this year we could start the in-depth work in terms of the development of the curriculum, and then hopefully by the ending of next year or the mid of next year, then incorporate that revised curriculum into ABIS. So we are doing a lot of work in terms of capacity building as well to ensure that the youths, and not only the youths, but also persons in the current workforce who are interested in developing their skill and developing their knowledge in the energy transition has the capability and the resources as well to develop themselves. Well,
Thanks, Vikash. I actually think this is my final slide, but next slide, just in case I'm wrong.
It's actually the final one.
Yes, that is definitely my final slide. So thanks so much for the time that you allowed us to speak about what's going on in Antigua and Barbuda.
No, thank you so much, Melissa and Bekas, for the presentation. I think that you have explained very profoundly the barriers. I think there are pretty common barriers, let's say, but with different solutions for you and different specifications and characteristics of the barrier that may give them the necessity of different solutions that we are encountering or finding in other Latin American countries mainly. We have some questions for the audience, and they have been coming as long as you were presenting the different projects. So I will go project by project because I do have some questions about each of them. The first one on e-buses about the data monitoring. I think that it may seem not so important, let's say, because it has not been important in the ICE buses until now. But we may say that this data monitoring and what you were describing, because all that information about the battery, the charging and up charging and down charging of the battery is key to be able to use the battery. And that comes to the battery disposal and end of life regulation that Melissa was talking at the end. We do know some companies that are already using those buses batteries as a backup for renewable energy services or generation, let's say. The main thing that they told us is we need to have the information as it was a kid, that you have all the vaccination list and you know the kid has been gone through in their life. So it's kind of the same thing, and it's really, really important. So how are you, if you're not getting all this data monitoring for the very beginning, are you doing it manually or how are you solving this issue?
So we would have monitored the buses, the school buses for about a year. And after that point, we stopped. So we have data for a year. However, the new buses that are going to be procured under the SLIM project, we recently would have issued a procurement to get a vehicle monitoring software, essentially telematics, to be incorporated into the vehicles. The chat, like what maybe we didn't mention, the issue is that many times these vehicles do have their own internal monitoring software. However, it doesn't work in the Caribbean. For example, the Nissan Leaf has its own app. It has an app, you could track it on your phone, but it's not available in Antigua and Barbuda. So we have to get a third-party external fleet management software to track the data of these of the vehicles.
Oh, so it's not even a development thing. It's just kind of preparing everything to be able to be used in Antigua. That's a different challenge. Let's see. You also talk about
Yes,
sorry?
I was saying it's a small island challenge, so it happens quite a bit. Not all the software is actually available for us.
Yeah, so the next thing it will be that you were saying that precisely these school buses were so the kids going to school will say that they like it better than the other ones. Do you see or have you monitor if they are using more? I don't know how the school the thing works in Antigua, but do they use it more? Do they leave the car, their parents' car at home, or they are asked to go by bus because they prefer going by bus than by car, something like that?
I'll allow Vikash to take that question just because I think my internet is struggling.
So we don't really have too much data on that, but really we have a school bus system in which it operates. It picks up students at certain points and drop them off to school and stuff like that. But what general feedback we have is if there was an ICE bus and an electric bus that pulls up at the school, So the students will generally go towards or rush towards the electric bus first rather than the ice bus. They like the comfort of it. They like certain aspects of it. They like that it has a general quick acceleration. Kids they tend to get excited for just some small stuff. So I think even the new technology itself has shown to be an advantage to them. Um, so in terms of leaving there, because it's school and it's not really in the public fleet, we don't really have much data. But in terms of pertaining to their preference when going from school to their homes, definitely they tend to go towards the EV buses.
I think that's a great kind of long-term communicational campaign. Not a campaign. I wouldn't say it's a campaign because it's more than a campaign, right? But those kids are growing up knowing that electric vehicles can perform and they are, they like it more. So maybe when they get older, maybe when their parents don't want to buy a new car, they will have a say and say, go for electric one, hopefully.
Yeah, well,
So,
it starts discussions. The thing about it is it will start discussions at home. Kids will go home and say, hey, mom, dad, I just rode a electric bus. It's really fun. It accelerates really nice. It's really comfortable. And I've seen no difference. I prefer it over the ice bus. So all of these things will generally start conversations at home, parents will probably have a more interest in terms of electric vehicles, doing some research on it, possibly just trying to get some information, as you said, if they're going to purchase new vehicles. So all of these things is how we intend to affect the diffusion of the technology. These word of mouth, these experiences, all those things we hope to help to assist with the diffusion as well.
yeah. So regarding that project, I think we do have no regarding the next project. So regarding the bidirectional charger, I have a bigger question on once you have tried that and you know that it works and you know that it can actually, as you said, light the school or that a particular building from 12 to 20 hours, then is there a broader objective from the country to set that as a part of the energy system, not only the transportation system, because you said that there is a plan to actually place bidirectional charging in other buildings, but like a environmentally speaking, like how does it comes into the energy transition of the country or something like that? Do you have that involved and engaged in everything?
Yes, definitely. As I mentioned, the thing about it is too, it was way cheaper than we thought it would be as well. Given the fact that it's really a new technology, we're expecting it to be very expensive. But when we look at it, the installation and with about a 2 year maintenance fee, it came up to around 7,000 US, which is relatively cheap for the installation, etc. Right? Um, but in terms of the long run, yes, we're definitely hoping that this could replace diesel generators at home. Because of the instability in the grid in Antigua and Barbuda, we tend to see like a lot of homes who could afford it. So more medium and high income homes, they have diesel generators as backup power. So we're hoping that simple things like this could eliminate the diesel generation, which will obviously, in the long run as well, eliminate the import of diesel and fossil fuel. And people will use this now as more backup for their homes and use this technology now as their backup for their homes. The thing about it is the electric vehicles, rather than just using an electric vehicle for driving on the road, there's several uses for a battery. I mean, an electric vehicle is just a battery in a car, right? So there's several usage and alternate usage for an electric vehicle rather than just driving it. So we could incorporate it as a backup generator for a home. We could also, as I mentioned as well, incorporate it as a redundant backup as well in emergency sectors, whether it be like fire stations, police stations, and those kind of things. So that holistically, there's a bigger use for it. But this pilot project, I should say, gave us an opportunity to understand the technology, understand the procurement of the technology, because it was really difficult to procure technology specifically for this, given the fact the small size of the load as well. So it gave us a really good understanding of lessons learned in terms of the technology. And then as we incorporate it now and diffuse the technology more in Antigua and Barbuda, how we could approach it. The other thing too is understanding how to program it pertaining to your grid codes. Everybody would have specific grid codes in which they would have to program um, the bidirectional charger to ensure that it doesn't feed back to the grid, etc. So all of these things is from a technical perspective, just from a usage perspective, from a procurement perspective, it gave us a lot of lessons learned and understanding of the technology that I know we could use going forward.
Thank you. Actually, one of the questions was the cost that you actually said about the technicians trained locally. So I guess that, as you were saying, there was a lot of understanding and training involved to get that pilot running. Means that you already have the capacity in the country to get to that next stage.
We have the capacity, but we don't have enough capacity. So the idea is it's a starting point. As Mel mentioned, there's really one EV company in Antigua and Barbuda, and he's responsible for all the maintenance and stuff like that. Fortunately, he has played a vital role in assisting us in pertaining to helping the training of ABIS and stuff like that. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of capacity building. That's just the reality of it. So within the next 2 to 3 years and even going further, we're hoping to try to build out the capacity because we really need the assistance in terms of installation, in terms of maintenance, those kind of things. So we're also trying to help through the capacity building as well to build entrepreneurship and innovation as well. And hopefully like these young persons could start their businesses as well, pertaining to the maintenance and the installation of these systems.
And I will. There's a comment that actually gets back to one of the things that you just said is that as important as is environmental emissions reduction, as Melissa you were saying at the beginning, the Caribbean countries and small development islands are not responsible for what is going on in the world, but you want to be part of the solution. That's so good. So being part of that is as important as reducing your imports on fuel, right? Because I guess that takes a lot of money. So because that is something that was commented on the chat, and I think that is something that comes back to what you were saying of having more stable grid, not based on fuel, but actually based on vehicle car capacity getting back to the houses. It's time. We are already an hour talking about this, but I will just like to comment 2 more things really quick. It's just what you both are mentioning is the capacity building, and Melissa, you actually pointed out as one of the barriers having people that is capable of doing the maintenance, doing these entrepreneurial activities regarding the electric vehicles and such. And I think that is somehow related to this known aspect of the energy transition and the overall economic transition of just transitions on how is electric mobility economy going to impact jobs in Antigua and Barbuda. Because I think that is something that is not so normally seen, but I think that it will be a displacement in some parts. That, people that do services for ICE vehicles that won't do that services anymore, but then they have to be trained to transition to another jobs. And I think that you're taking as a government that part of training so that when they ask for these jobs, that you will have people in the country that they will be able to fulfill those positions. So I think that I will just wanted to mention that thing because it's a really good vision of a long-term strong policy going on in the island, not only bringing vehicles and such, but actually moving all the economy towards where we want to go in a few years. So I wanted to mention that before going. So we are 2 minutes past the hour. I don't know, Melissa and Bekash, if there's something else that you would like to tell the audience right now.
What I would say is, I'm not sure who's listening, but we issue procurement fairly regularly please look at our social media. You could follow us on Instagram, Facebook. Jonah sometimes reposts our procurement opportunities, so please apply. We really need to expand our reach as it relates to our procurement. Like I would have mentioned, we're trying to get as much traction as possible so we could get the best option in Antigua and Barbuda. So our Instagram is do_environ. So please take a look at our social media, and you'll be able to keep up to date on what we're doing, what we're procuring, and anything that's going on at the DOE in Antigua.
I would just like to thank everybody who joined the presentation this morning. And I hope you guys got a good insight in terms of what we're doing in Antigua and Barbuda for the energy transition, in terms not for just the transport sector, but also the energy sector as well. And if you have any questions, or if you need any kind of discussions, as Mel mentioned, you could follow us on Instagram, or you could even look at our LinkedIn page. We tend to post a lot. And then if you have any questions, we could communicate via them as well.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Bekas. We will do our part to try to get your procurement advices to everyone of the electric mobility sector. So thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you so much for the conversation. And thank you so much for all you that are watching us today. We'll come back with another mobile session in 3 weeks. So thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.